Do you know where the name the City of Light comes from for Paris? Obviously everybody knows Paris is called the City of Light, but why? We'll get to that. I'd love to hear what you think though below. Maybe you already know. I should have known this one. I think I had multiple different reasons in my head why, but now I finally know. So I started this new book. It's a book that I've had on my shelf for like 5 or 6 years, and it just always intimidated me. It's a book on the history of France from 1870 to present. And I already learned something new. I mean, I already learned a bunch of new stuff, but like something stood out. It's about the term bourgeois, which is a term that I always kind of took to be pejorative, which for starters, it's not. But for second, the origin, it comes from the word for town, or a word for town. The word bourg is another word for town, right? Burg, a burg. And the bourgeois, the townspeople were the ones that didn't have to live off the land. Peasants and nobility lived off the land. If you worked in town and made a living for yourself, you were a bourgeois. And so it was kind of like a self-made or independently wealthy person. And I still have a hard time getting the negative connotations from like the English-speaking world out of my head when I hear bourgeois, but I found that fascinating. After the revolution of 1789, like the big revolution, the bourgeoisie became increasingly powerful. The nobility never really left France. It's one of those interesting things that I think people tend to forget, that despite the liberté, égalité, fraternité talk, like there's still, quite the social class structure. But they started to erode that a little bit, including with their clothing. And that was one of the things that really stood out to me from what I was reading this morning. Well, one of the other things. There was a lot, I feel like, that stood out this morning. There are worse ways to wait for coffee. Are you thirsty? He has a point. I'm really happy that I started reading this book. When I first got it, it felt way too dense, and I realized the reason is because I think I got stuck in the forward matter, front material, whatever you call that, and the dates and the kings and the, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, ugh, I don't know that I have it in me for this. Now that I've actually started reading it though, I'm really glad that I started. I feel like I know a lot about French history, but there's so many details. There's some more details. I'll share some more. How about that? How about I just share 4 more things that have stood out to me so far just in the first chapter of this book? Does that sound good to you, buddy? Don't lick it. This noir is ridiculously pink. It's just pink everywhere. Coffee with Victoria upstairs, and then we're gonna get to see, I forgot to tell you who we're seeing today. Irish Mark, theoretically, this afternoon. Depending on how things go. I think we might also get to see Rory and Angus. I don't know if we've met. Have we met Rory and Angus recently? There's a pub that I really want to verify that's over near Mark's office, and I've seen it briefly in a short that I made. But he started his own scooter tour company, and I'm really proud of him. So we're gonna go check that out and also, just get a drink and catch up, because I haven't hung out in a long time. Just for a point of clarification, I didn't say this, but the bourg, that whole bourgeois, that actually originates from the Middle Ages. This book starts in the 19th century, though. That's where we're picking up. Of course, given that it's the 19th century so far in the book, we'll get into the modern, today era eventually. The metro hasn't been, I would say, invented yet. Obviously, they were the second ones to do it, but we'll get there soon enough. It also means that we're not going to get to things like the World's Fair. Well, we should get to the World's Fair actually pretty quickly, because it was right at the end of the 19th century. I read a really interesting book about the World's Fair specifically that I never fully finished. I should go back and read that too. Fascinating. But the descriptions that he had for working conditions is kind of that era where you see the first shift of rural to urban. And the working conditions were insane. People worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week. Adults did. Kids obviously worked. Who knows how much kids worked? But it's pretty nuts to see also the difference between rural living and urban living in terms of how much people spent on food in rural areas. We're not talking about the rich, obviously. We're talking about the vast majority of French people. They spent 2/3 of their earnings on food in rural areas. In Paris, they would spend 3/4 of their earnings, everything they made, on food, mostly bread, because bread was the only thing that was actually affordable, which also ties into the relationship the French have with bread. It's everywhere, obviously, and delicious and cheap, and always remains cheap, because it was the only thing they could ever really afford to eat to begin with. But in Paris, a lot of families, like working class families, would actually go to bed at nightfall just to avoid the cost of lighting. So lighting in the city was, a pretty big thing at this point. Oh yeah, the city of light. But before we get to, the fun part, shopping. You might know that I'm not exactly the most avid shopper personally, but I'm starting to understand why it's so important to Paris, and more importantly, maybe more poignantly, why it's more important to women, and part of the relationship that women then have with Paris as a result. The big department stores all started in the mid-19th century. Like BHV was the second one. I think the first was the Bon Marché. Bonjour, madame. And there's something that I always tend to forget, because I often think that like this is a very progressive period for France between revolutions and people getting their rights and things changing, but women's rights had actually they've regressed significantly. And so the department stores that opened in this period actually gave women like a place to go and remain respectable. They couldn't even necessarily go out without an escort, like a male escort, somebody to walk them around. Not that kind of male escort, but you know what I mean? And so to have these spaces that were clean, where they could dress appropriately, they'd keep their feet out of the poop, as it were, as they're walking around shopping, meant that instead of sending their servants to go shopping for them, they were able to do it themselves. We just switched from like talking about poor people to talking about rich people again here in this, but it was an early step towards emancipation and something that I hadn't put together. And it also makes me wonder, like, is that part of the reason that so many women around the world are infatuated with Paris? Is it tied to this sense of like burgeoning freedom, liberty for ladies? I don't know. You can let me know in the comments below. Party Central over here.
Yo.
How's it going?
How you doing?
Not too late.
Welcome back.
It's an Angus in forever. Cheers.
Cheers.
I didn't realize that Comptoir d'Irlandais or Comptoir.
This is a spot that I haven't been for a while to try the nachos, and I've been wanting to make sure to come back and test it out, so that was the goal here today. But having a pint with the boys, and by a pint, I mean, I think we're 5 in?
Flash freezer, but that was a chef who's got a
Anyways.
flash freezer.
They're good, they're better than I remember. I think they've actually upgraded them, so they get to stay in my guide for the nachos specifically. If you're coming to Paris and you want nachos, it's gonna be a rare person. Do you want to snuggle up? What are you doing? All right, well, we're here with a bunch of tour guides. I figured I'd ask, or at least what do you tell people? Where does the name City of Light come from?
City Light comes from Louis XIV because he made Paris the first city in Europe that had all gas lighting.
I would like to argue with that. So during the period of illumination, which is people from all around the world in different walks of life, if you get the period of enlightenment, there was enlightenment happening here in Paris.
writers during the illumination.
Exactly. It's just ideas to try and make Paris this city that the world would generate new knowledge and information, try and illuminate the darkness. So it became the city of light, not the city of lights. It became the city of light because they were sharing information, and that's where the Latin Quarter got its name, being everybody spoke Latin there because they couldn't communicate. So Latin Quarter, city of light.
Can I argue?
Yeah.
His is metaphorical. Mine is physical. His was like City of Lights. That's what. And you said, why is it called the City of Lights? And I'm like, because of lights. And he's like, why is it? That's why they call it the City of Lights, not lights. And it's like, well, that's
Good point. Did you say city of light?
I said City of Light, actually singular, but I was going to say what I read today was that it's because Osman and Napoleon III installed 18,000 gas lamps, and so then it became known as that. Yeah. So we a good mixture.
Paris was the first city to use gas lights to illuminate the streets. And what?
Under whom?
In the 19th century, so it would have been
Napoleon III. Yeah. I knew I was leading them into a trap when I asked the question, so don't judge. Yeah, don't judge them.
He loves me, I'm so sorry, but he loves me.
Clearly.
Daddy?
And thanks, of course, to today's Patron producer, Marisol. Marisol. Thank you. It's been a fun night.